Okay. Hi there. So my name is Dave Millard. Welcome to the week one review of our MOOC, The Power of Social Media. The first week's gone really well. We've had over 2,000 learners engage with the course. We've had more than 600 people who've left more than 3,200 comments. And congratulations to the 320 people who've completed the course. Remember, you're entitled to purchase a statement of participation. So also thank you for the people who left some questions. I'm not going to be able to address all of them, but I've picked out some of the ones that I thought would be interesting to talk through. The first one is really, in fact, it's something that a number of people have mentioned, by Ahmad Eldaran and Robin Ruder, amid others. We're talking about being skeptical about the power of social media analysis and about what you could learn by looking at network structure. And what they're really talking about is the difference between quantitative and qualitative analysis. Now, in our toy office network, for example, it was quite easy to read that network and look at what Dan was posting about his colleagues and see that he has obviously some significant power amongst other people in that group. And that's something we can do with that office network because it's very small and because we can read all of those tweets. But you can't read all of Twitter. Right? Twitter has something like 500 million tweets every single day. And so you have to use some of these automated methods to tell you about what is going on in the wider network. It is true that some of the early social network analysts probably did read a little bit too much into their analyses, and they forgot some of the context of the networks. And we tried in what we presented to very much say, never forget the context of the network, never forget you're dealing with real people. And I think that is also true of people who are now doing research in social network analysis. It's much more common, for example, to draw much more careful conclusions about what your data is telling you, or to use mixed methods. So, for example, to look in more detail at case studies, or to interview participants, and actually look at some of the motivations behind why people are saying things, why they're behaving the way they are, and really starting to understand some of the motivations behind people's behaviour. I thought Jan Brown had a really interesting question. She said, at what point does Mehrabian's sort of analysis of communication become invalid? So this is the idea, if you're not familiar with it, that the majority of communication is not through speech, but is through things like body language, the context of interaction, those kind of things. And it's interesting, I think, to note that on the internet, we've actually seen this from day one, the very early days of bulletin boards and email and so on. We've always seen that there have been internet abbreviations, things like laugh out loud, roll on floor laughing. These are little messages that you can post that tell somebody about the context of your response beyond your actual words. And I think in the last few years, we've really seen the rise of emojis as a really important way for people to communicate online. And particularly with the sort of latest updates to smartphones and so on, emojis very much becoming a kind of default way to give context to your communications, to your statements, and to really give people some kind of deeper understanding of what you meant. I also think it's true that we're seeing the use of memes, we're seeing the use of hashtags, and actually the use of social media actions beyond posting, such things like retweeting and likes. These are all ways in which we communicate with other people online. Those people who look at digital literacy see online social literacy as a very important part of digital literacy, effectively understanding the rules of social and online social interaction, and being able to talk to others online effectively. So Lorcan Hankin asked a really timely question, which was, do I think that the power of social media has contributed to the rise of Donald Trump? And I guess in the UK we might also look at it and say, has it affected the Brexit referendum? Now, without going into too many details, because I think it's a fascinating topic that you could talk about for a very long time, I think there are certainly some features of social media that did play into those phenomena. The first one of that is an idea called cyber balkanization. So cyber balkanization is the idea that although online we get to talk to many other different types of people, because of the principle of homophily, we tend to talk to people who are kind of like us. So that rather than living in kind of vertical silos where we talk to people who are near us geographically, we've started to live in sort of horizontal silos where we talk to people who are like us. So I'm an academic, so I know lots of people online, but a large majority of them work in universities. They're in the academic space. They're students and staff at other universities. And that creates a problem because it creates an echo chamber. It means that you're exposed to the opinions and views of people who are like you. And that's probably helped give rise to organisations and movements like the alt-right, which really have been behind some of the popular success of Donald Trump's campaign. Another factor I think is a problem is something that's called the filter bubble, and it's very much related to the first one. The filter bubble is the idea that, for example, when you're on Facebook, the stories and the features and the information that's given to you is selected by Facebook. It's filtered for you. In essence, there is an artificial intelligence deciding what information to give you to keep you as happy as possible. And again, that creates problems because it tends to bounce back our ideas and our feelings back to us. And people are simply not exposed to the kind of diverse opinions and views that they might be if that system wasn't in place. Finally, there's the issue of fake news. And really what we're seeing here is a problem to do with the flattening of news sources. It's no longer clear where the news you're getting is coming from. Is it coming from a more reputable source or is it coming from some blog online? And really that's an issue to do with digital literacy. And information literacy, the ability to understand the provenance of information, is a real problem, I think, with our interaction online and something that we should be prioritising much more in our educational system. And the last thing I wanted to talk about really picked up that last point. So Nicole Mickles and Sue Waverley both asked about fake news and false information online. I think this is rapidly becoming a critical problem. There are all sorts of reasons for it. We've seen major disruption to journalism over the last 10 years or so. There are simply fewer professional journalists working and producing the news that we consume. There's an increased reliance on news agencies. And we're also seeing social media itself becoming news. Going back to the Donald Trump example, if Trump tweets something contentious, then that gets picked up and put out there on the wires. So this is a real problem. How do we respond to it? Well, a number of people are looking at different ways in which we might construct our news. Initiatives like citizen journalism, for example, where everyday citizens get involved in collectively creating news, or data journalism, where the news becomes much more transparent. It becomes much more about the analysis of the facts, and that transparency is also a theme that we might see in work to do with provenance, actually looking at where does this information come from that we are consuming. And again, that comes back to digital literacy. It comes back to questioning our sources, questioning the things that we're looking at, and actually trying to understand where the information we are listening to, where it has come from. I think that, when social networks came along back in the 2000s, and this big explosion of social networks, people at the time really wondered if this was a temporary phenomenon. It's increasingly clear that social networks are an important communications channel. And I think it's also becoming clear that they could well be affecting the way that our society is actually working. I think certainly if you look at things like the recent presidential election, if you look at the referendum campaign in the UK, and actually right across the world, you can see that social networking is having this very substantial impact. And I think in that world it's more important than ever to be aware of the bigger picture. And really that's what this first week has all been about trying to say you don't need to look at social networks just from your perspective, looking out at the friends and the connections you have, but you can step back and you can see them as a whole, and you can try and understand what's going on in social networks as a big picture. So next week we're going to move from theory to practice, looking at the best ways that you as an individual can respond to those issues, and help you to avoid some of the pitfalls while still taking advantage of what social media can offer. These are exciting times, and I think this is a really interesting opportunity for us to explore new ways to communicate together. Thank you.